Hey guys, what's going on? So currently on Thursday market breakdown, looking at the DXY. As we can see, the DXY is still moving in this correction as we have been looking in all week. We are basically waiting for the DXY to basically fill this move. We want to see what happens. Obviously on the weekly we can see we are moving quite aggressively to this price point, which is very good. On the daily, we can see that it's getting somewhat level of corrective, and then on the 4 hour, we can actually see the breakdown. So it's very nice that we can see how price is actually just not the cleanest of structures, but there is structure within there moving towards there, and it's also very corrective in terms of its RO3. So the one thing I do like about this is the approach. We're moving there very correctively. We just want to evaluate once we get to this area what will happen. We have to always be aware that we can move there quite impulsively, and we might just get a very strong candle and it moves up aggressively, a small sort of ascending correction, and then maybe we get a reversal pattern. We just have to evaluate at that point there, but we're very close to this area, and I would not be surprised if we do move up even more aggressively because the majority of the move is corrective. Moving on to the JP225, the one thing that I do love about this right now is that besides the point that the obvious we've traveled to this high, broken above it, creating the people on the wrong side of the market now, but also we're creating this sort of ending structure, which I do like a lot. And we can see that across the board with the other yen pairs, which I think correlates very well. It will give us a nice little indication of a sell-off. We have to always be aware of particular price points where price can pivot, but more so I'm looking at this rate line to the 1, 2, 3, and I just want to evaluate that closely, because really and truly, if we're going to sell off across the board on all these pairs, I think the JP225 is going to be aligned very well. So that's something to be aware of. Remember, we did have that head and shoulders forecast, but I think at this point here, I'm not going to be too convinced with that head and shoulders just because of how the patterns are forming, and I'm also going to be looking at this sort of structure in itself. So that's it for the JP225. I'm not going to be taking any trades directly on it, but I will be taking trades on the correlating pairs. So jumping straight into it, looking at USD yen, we could see yesterday that it was looking somewhat like some level of rejection with this sort of evening star formation across this inflection point. However, we can see that this is the real area of value. We have a structure leading into it. We have this sort of corrective, aggressive movement to the high, which I do like a lot. And then we can see that on the 4 hour, we are creating sort of structure to get there. Does this become an expanding? We just have to kind of evaluate. I don't think this is my typical sort of pattern here, but we can see that this is a 2-touch corrective middle section, move up, push up, and then maybe just kind of extend, tap into this. DXY goes off on one as well. JP225 goes off on one, and then we get a nice, beautiful sell-off. So that's basically how I'm looking at it. This is the true value area. You can see I've already set my alert, which I think if you're not doing that, you should be setting these alerts, because you can be by the charts, you can be away from the charts, but you know when you need to be by the chart. That's the most important part. So that's basically it for the US yen. Looking at EuroCAD. EuroCAD is basically, I was waiting for price to come up to here before I looked for a sell. Didn't quite get that, unfortunately, at this point. However, there is still the possibility that this can become something else. So just kind of reading between the lines and just waiting to see what happens. Does this become a flag to push to the high, and then it creates its own sort of movement there? I'm just going to wait and see. I'm going to keep this forecast on here. I'm not too bothered with this, but we have to bear in mind that this can still sell off. We can just move off, push down, create a flag down here, and sell. We have to understand that that is also always a possibility, but more so if we do somehow make our way back up here, which probably won't be a this week trade, then we can look for the sell. So that's basically what I was looking for in EuroCAD, but at the moment we're not getting it, so we're just going to have to wait and see. We did have that 4 hour aggressive push down, and we got some level of a retrace. Not enough for me to be looking for a long position at this point. However, we do have a solid push up in this area. We could say that this is your morning star, because really and truly it's valid, but the continuation after it just didn't really fit what I'm looking at. We had that push, there was some level of a correction there, now it's become something a lot larger. I think I'll just leave it personally. Aussie US dollar, one of my favorited pairs this week. It's still one that I am going to be waiting for, very similar to EuroCAD. So we have, let's just quickly zoom out a little bit. We can see here that we've had an aggressive push down, created a larger pattern, push down, and now we're creating an expanding pattern just below it before we sell off. Typical pair where we move up 50% and then just sell off. It happens quite a lot with this pair. However, one thing that I am going to be waiting for and keeping it very simple is just waiting for price to make it to these areas, push down, create a flag, and then I'll be in for that run. That's as simple as it gets, really. So if we don't get that, trade's not there, but that's basically it. So set my alert, just going to wait to see how it develops. If it gets there, it gets there. GBP yen. So as I mentioned with the JP225, we're seeing a lot of these ending structures at the moment. What I'm seeing here is a final squeeze. So if I just drill out to the daily, we can see here that we have an ending 1, 2, 3 into this. We have a corrective, aggressive movement to the high. Not very aggressive, but very corrective, and it's taken a long time for us to get here. So we have to appreciate the fact that patience is very, very key in these areas. We have to understand that also we have this final sort of squeeze into this. So I wouldn't really be drawing any lines on personally, just because it's too messy. Have to kind of read between the lines and separate, what it is that we're looking at, where, we kind of come into a correction, which is basically just shouting, price is exhausting at this point. And then we're correcting, pushing. We're kind of coming to its end of its exhaustion. We have to understand that there's a strong possibility that we could turn around with the other yen pairs and have a very, very good bear market in play. So one to be very patient for. I think if you are struggling with consistency, or you're struggling with basically kind of taking it to the next level, then you can take it to the next level. You just have to be patient for these particular trades, because once the market has turned and we're starting to get these aggressive drop-offs, you can capitalize on it very, very well. There won't be as much opportunity, and don't feel like, and I think this is one massive lesson that I think everyone can learn from, is that if price came here, didn't quite go all the way up, and then suddenly just dropped off here, don't think you FOMO'd or missed out, because honestly, when you zoom out, you look at it on the weekly, that's not even the beginning of this. This will have not hundreds, but more like 30 or 15 different setups towards the low. Depending on how you trade, there's probably going to be hundreds, but there's going to be so many setups on the way down. So there'll be a flag there, there'll be one down here, and they'll be as clear as day. Some of them won't catch them all, but and then next thing you know, we're down here, and you could have scaled in 3 trades on the way down by just being hella patient. And then next thing you know, you're trading 3-4 scale ups. So just want to share that with you. I think that's very, very important that you understand that we have structure developed here. It's there. We have a 1, 2, 1, 2 coming to the third touch. We're breaking above. We're tapping into this inflection point higher. There isn't any point anywhere near it. If it does aggressively start to move up, okay, it is what it is. Then we look for long positions. It's simple as that. But it's more than likely that we're going to see a strong sell-off. So it's one to stay very, very sharp with, in my opinion. Next one I'll be looking at is New Zealand yen. I think New Zealand yen is somewhat of a more trickier one, but you definitely have to learn to read between the lines. We basically had this sort of pattern, then we had expanding 1, 2, 3 into it, and then we kind of just pushed away. Has the sell run already began? I think so. I believe the sell position has already ran. I think it's more than likely that we might just see aggressive movement, and we might get something like that. And if we do, then if it's leading into something significant, I could look for the sell position. If I don't get it, I'm just going to leave it. I think there's the possibility that we could get something like this, but then you have to understand we're trading on this low, and we're so close to that low down there. Is there enough room to manage from here to here? If there is, then by all means, it's definitely worth the position. But in my opinion, there's so many better pairs on board at the moment, I wouldn't really waste my energy on it. We have to understand that there is a massive movement here though as well. So if you do take this position, you could be in for a massive run, because that's just the first price target. And then as we start to drop off, we might even become more aggressive and come to these areas before we start to come back up. or continue dropping off. Who knows? Also, you have to understand that this can just still be more part of this corrective sort of squeeze, and then just becomes its own sort of massive correction to go to the upside. Many variations of what could potentially be. New Zealand yen is not one of the most favoured ones out of the yen pairs, but I think it's definitely one that, you know, deserves a bit of attention as well. EA. Now, EA is a simple, easy one. We've already tapped into that high, which is very interesting. There's more than enough for it to begin its sell-off. However, looking at it from this perspective now, it's not one where I'm just going to really just say let's draw on some lines and, you know, go with it, but this does some level of jump out to me. We have this sort of level of this middle section here, and then we have a 1, 2 equal spacing scoop, equal spacing, and then the 3. We can ever so much evolve, which I think evolving at this point wouldn't necessarily be terrible, but it would just require some good level of skill, where we kind of just take this bit of price and this bit of price, and we just look at it for what it is. That's always a possibility. I mean, to be honest, I'm not too bothered with this. I just want to see how price reacts. So more so, I wouldn't really be drawing these lines so much. I'll just kind of wait through it. I think at this point in time, just kind of try read between it. We have this inflection point here, and we have this sort of price moving into it. Do we get something like this where we correctively just tap into any point there, and then we move up, hit the high, and sell off? That's more than enough for this M-Star. And I do like that. I think I like that a lot more, and I think this is the sort of structure I'll be looking in towards, more so than the larger structure there. We've already made it to its value area, we've broken above, we're now sitting in the area, now looking for that additional confirmation. If anything is missed, then I'll just wait till we kind of break out of all that price, break below here, any continuation below there, that's where I'll be going with it. So that's basically what I'll be looking at for EJ, but more so I think this is a very nice structure if this does happen to play. Moving on to the wildcards, structurally, CAD-Gen is the best one by far. You know, if we just look at this over here, we have strong impulse, push away from the high, cleared. We didn't tap into that high, fair enough, so that's the only negative confluence there, but we're still playing this range. We then move on to the daily. We can see that we've had a strong push away, this sort of flag, and then we create something larger, and now we've had an extension to tap into liquidity area. The only negative is obviously we have this small liquidity area sitting above it, where it can just push up aggressively and then sell off. But then if we push up here, then there's a question of, are we going to come up here, and so forth. So like I said, there's more than enough right now in this area here for us to sell off, because we have tapped into it, we've pushed above and broken below. If we look at it on the daily, on the hourly as well, we have a retrace over here as well, retrace there. You know, there's more than enough, and then we can just evaluate from this sort of point here and say, okay, cool. If we basically come here, retrace, start selling off, was that enough? Absolutely. Then again, we can take this sort of trend line here, and structurally we can say this is the middle section for the price to get here, for it to sell off. And I think that is the gameplay that I'm looking for, considering that if we look at the JP225, we're seeing very similar price action on the board. You know, not the most cleanest, but obviously the corrective middle section to the high, corrective middle section to the high on the GBP yen, corrective middle section to the high. Not so much visible on New Zealand yen, but on Euro yen as well, we can see it, corrective middle section to the high. So these patterns are all repeating themselves, which I think is very, very nice, because this is the go-to strategy. So moving on to the next one, which is Aussie yen, we have the same thing again. I think it's become self-explanatory at this point when you are looking at these yen pairs, and now you know what to look at, right? So we can see that we have this sort of inflection point just above, we have this high over here, and then we have this aggressive potential play. There's a strong possibility that we don't even make it there. I think we have to keep that into consideration, that, you know, price can just drop off at some point, but understanding that price can just create something, and we get some aggressive ball movement, and next thing you know, we're up here, and then you're thinking, whoa, that buy would have been phenomenal, right? So I think definitely don't FOMO into any trade and just go into a buy. Wait for the sell. I think genuinely wait for the sell. You can take the counter trend trade if you really wanted to. I think that really comes with a lot of risk. If you're up on your account 10, 15, 20% for the month, fair enough. I don't at that point, it's up to you. But I think waiting for these patterns to form, as we can see them all across the board, then you can size them up, see which one works out best for you, and then position yourself strategically. So that's basically AJ. More so interested in the trend lines than the pattern here, but it's always good to just forecast something on there as well. New Zealand CAD. Now, this one, I think, we've come down very, very correctively. I think this is just a trap now. I think this in itself is just the one big correction, which I think people are now getting caught into it, thinking, okay, maybe we were wrong. It's not going to go bullish, but you'll be surprised when you leave your guard down. This is going to jump. This is going to power up. So I think stay very, very sharp with this pair. Has so much potential to the upside. Right now, it's just taking people at the market, let it do its thing, and then when we see them strong pullbacks and we're trading back up here somewhere and we start creating a flag, that's where you want to be getting involved for that long position, because you're not just trading into that high there, you're trading to potentially this high and then this high and then potentially even further. So that could be one to really turn your portfolio over. So I think New Zealand CAD is definitely one you have to stay very, very sharp with. May not be this week, may not be next week, but it'll be very, very soon. Okay, so US dollar Swiss. This is one that I've been contemplating as well. I think the fact that we have that near miss, that corrective sharp move up, it's not my typical trade, I'll be honest with you. But looking at it on the 4 hour, we can see that we have this corrective squeeze over here. And within that corrective squeeze, we can see that we move to this inflection point. On the inflection point, we did have a 4 hour retrace, which is actually somewhat very, very nice. On the hourly, we can see that we have this very corrective squeeze sideways. Sideways price action is not a bad thing. However, given how the DXY is shaping up and with the amount of bull momentum in it, I don't know if I really want to be positioning myself for the short right now. I'm more so happy to wait for the DXY to shape up, because this has more than enough potential to come back up, do that, and then for me to be like, okay, that's where the trade is. Do you know what I mean? So I think I don't want to be sucked into this just because I'm seeing this sort of price action for the short. If I was significantly up on my account, perhaps I would consider taking that risk. We have that potential for the left head, right shoulder situation as well, but more so, this is not a bad trade. I just think it comes with a bit of risk. That correction isn't my typical correction. We do have some equal spacing, but what is it trading into? It's just kind of a bit messy for me, this flag. And I think it does come with Swiss pairs as well. Swiss pairs aren't typically always the cleanest, and they do commit very, very well. Structurally, we can see that, this is just some lines drawn on the chart right now. We can't pretty much say that, this is it. So for that reason, I think I'm just going to opt in and not take a trade on this right now and just wait until we get some commitment. If we get commitment and this drops off, the next thing you know, we're trading, we create a nice little decent flag over there, then I'll opt in for the sell. And I think that's the only time I will really be looking in for the sell. I think in terms of evolving those trend lines I was looking at, if I was really to evolve it, I would be looking at it like this. And then I would really ask myself, are we ready to sell off? And then I would look at this and say, okay, cool. So if this was to create more of a middle section and then come back up, where would it tap into? Well, it could clearly tap into one of these areas here for it then to sell off, which would then be no more of a surprise, because we would then see a line with structure on the DXY. And I think for that kind of jumps out to me and says that's much more better of a quality of a trade, because we have more of equal spacing, the structure's more there, it's kind of more in line with what I'm seeing, and then that to the short could be a much better play. So that's basically what I'm looking at for USD Swiss. And then Euro Aussie, I think Euro Aussie as well. Euro Aussie is good, like really good. It's nice the fact that we've pushed down, we've corrected into a correction, which somewhat doesn't really jump out to me, but we still have that sort of left shoulder over here, head, And then is this just a bit of a right shoulder? Maybe, but it's not my typical trade. This is looking like a push up to correct and then maybe fill this gap over here. At the moment, I think the best thing you can do is be patient with this, because if it does do its thing and then aggressively moves up and it's up here, then you don't really have to shoot yourself in the leg and be like, oh, I knew it, or whatever. But so what? There's going to be an abundance of trades. Let me just size that up a little bit. Okay, cool. So all we really want to do now is wait to see if we get pushed in here, and then we push up, create a flag here. That could be more than enough for you to get that run into that. If that happens, okay, there's a possibility we can still sell off on this, but if you get something like that, I wouldn't really hesitate on that trade. It just kind of overall jumps out to me that would be a very nice impulsive move, because it started off more correctively. So even if it had the impulsive move, it becomes more neutral and it becomes that corrective move to that high. So EA jumps out to me as a very good trade as well, just requires a bit more patience. And then Euro USD, in line with the DXY, we're seeing the DXY moving with that very, very nice structure. I think this one is not so much, I can't really make it out to be exactly like the DXY in a sense, because with the DXY we kind of have more something like that, where here we can see that it's more in a downwards angle, in a descending channel. So looking at it like this, we can see it potentially correct, tap into this, and then sell off, which if I just invert that back, we can see some good bull movement coming into the market. Whereas if we look at it on the DXY, we're seeing some good sell movement coming into the market. So it makes sense, right? Where we're seeing this more so in that running channel vibe, but then again, this can become a little bit more flatter as well. It doesn't have to be at that angle. We just have to understand that this is definitely a strong possibility, and this can still become its running channel to the upside, and it is looking more and more like that the more we evaluate and look at how USD is now structurally playing itself. So yeah, essentially that's basically how I'm looking at it. Obviously I won't be taking the trade bang on the bottom off this Euro USD. I think it's pointless. I think it's a waste of money, a waste of patience and potential. I think the best thing to do is just wait for that push up and then some confirmation on this as well, especially in line with the DXY, and then positioning yourself strategically there. I think the most important ones for us to pay attention to are EA. I think USD Swiss kind of falls behind now, so not going to be putting any special attention into that. I think New Zealand CAD as well. It's just one that I think keep it on soft watch on the side, but if it jumps, it jumps, and then it'll give you more than enough time to be ready. AJ needs some time to develop. CJ, you know what? CJ Friday today maybe. I think definitely keep that one there. EJ not yet. New Zealand yen. It's one that I think it's up to you. Considering what else we have on pair on watch. This is looking a little bit messy, so we'll just clear off the charts a little bit and take this off. And yeah, we just need to keep it very, very simple and wait for that. I think that needs a bit more time, so I'm not really going to put that one on me. You know what? We don't really have any sort of anything that's really saying to me that we shouldn't have it on watch, but we're trading so close to it, I'll keep it there. And then Aussie US dollar, same situation, need some time, keep that on watch. Euro CAD, it's in a very good area right now, but me personally, I'll give it some time to develop before I even look at it properly. Yeah, so I won't put that on watch today, not just yet. And then USD yen, I think USD yen has potential as well. We could see, with the upcoming news, we have to be aware that we can see some very good push in the market. So, let's just look at today at 3 o'clock. We have some news coming out, and then continuing tomorrow we have NFP and Euro employment rate. So I think that's the catalyst of what we need, really and truly. Will we get the push to the price now, and then tomorrow forming with NFP, we get the sell, where we get the volatile spike up against the market's price, then we catch into the market, and then we get tagged in, and then we go in for the short position, and then we're basically in for the run. I think tomorrow's NFP is where people will get caught out in the market. I've seen it many times where news like this just happens to be aligned with how things are happening. And yeah, just let's see how it shapes up anyway. So that's basically it for my watch list this week. Any questions, anything, just let me know, drop a comment below, and catch you in the next video.